Okay, this week I want to talk about one of my favorite books in my field, the study of religion. Technically, my master's degree is Applied Theology, the future of American religion. I got my master's degree at Northwend Theological Seminary under Thomas J. Ord, who is an open and relational theologian, if you're interested. But one of the key books in my field was Tara Isabella Burton's book, Strange Rites, which is about the 7 new religions in America. And essentially the concept is that if human nature is basically the same as it's been for centuries, that we're not fundamentally different than people 100 years ago, at least in our psychology, and people are leaving religion, then where are they going? Where are they going for community? Where are they going for identity? Where are they going for story? What is Gen Z doing? How are people orientating? And this is actually my favorite definition of religion that comes from religious scholar Mircea Eliade, who's a Romanian historian of religion and a philosopher of religion. And my favorite definition that I've heard of religion is that religion is how you orient yourself in the cosmos. And of course, in the West, we think of Abrahamic religions as religious. So like, no, I'm not religious if you're not, Jewish or Christian or Muslim. But it's actually really difficult to come up with a definition of religion that explains all kinds of religions. So Eastern religions that are non-theistic, or religions from 5,000, 10,000 years ago. And so this definition of religion being how you orient yourself in the universe kind of describes all of them, because it's what's happening at the core. At the core, you're born into a world of chaos. We don't know what we are, or why we're here, what to do, and or what stories to live by. And so how we orient are the stories, the people, the rituals, the meaning, the values, how you see reality, how you process death, all of that. Essentially, your way of life is your religion. And so my religion, if we were going to extend this to me, is non-supernatural, but very existentialist, very humanist, but also holds space for mysticism. And these philosophies help orient me. But today isn't about me. Today is going to be about the 7 new religions in America that are providing the things that humans still need: community, identity, story, philosophy, even if you're not sitting in the pews anymore. So like what's essentially filling in those needs that are still there for humans. So the first religion is wellness. And this is usually framed as you have a body that's contaminated by fast food and chemicals and processed food. And so followers of this religion are taught that you can reclaim purity. It's almost like that you can cheat death itself by buying certain products or subscribing to specific diets. For women, it's going to be a lot more diet culture. Men, podcast bros kind of rebrand that to, biohacking. But this mirrors the religious mythologies of the fall and contamination and redemption. So it almost talks about health in a way where like you're never going to die if you can just detox enough. And if you listen to like Gwyneth Paltrow and like how much she's continually detoxing, it almost sounds like you're trying to cheat death itself by having like the most pure kind of body. And so wellness culture today doesn't sell just like smoothies and skincare. It's a whole worldview. And sociologists and writers like Rena Raphael, who wrote The Gospel of Wellness, argue that wellness has essentially become a modern religion, especially for women who have lost trust in traditional medicine and patriarchal religion and institutions, which of course I understand. And so instead of churches, we have yoga studios and meditation apps. Instead of priests, we have influencers and wellness gurus. Instead of sin and repentance, we're told to detox, to cleanse our bodies of toxins, real or imagined, as if body purity is really the highest moral good. And there's some real data behind this shift. So scholars like Adam Posamai call it a hyper-real religion, where we build spiritual meaning out of brands and lifestyle rituals. So like Goop summits essentially become like a pilgrimage, and juice fasts become spiritual, and biohacking conferences become your pilgrimage in your community. And practices like breath work and sound baths once offer kind of the catharsis that prayer or confession once did. And so what's wild is that these rituals are deeply emotional and communal, just like religion, but they're marketed as personal optimization. So you're becoming a better person, and people really believe in them. There's even like the pseudoscientific claims like crystals and balancing your chakras that can be incredibly incredibly compelling when you wrap it in community and identity and this promise of control and self-actualization. So a great example of this is, of course, Brian Johnson. I think he's actually ex-Mormon. I haven't watched his documentary, but I think he was raised Mormon, for the few Mormons that are listening. But he's a tech millionaire behind the Blueprint anti-aging protocol that if you spend any time online, you've probably seen his ads. And he spends millions of dollars every year to biologically stop aging. So he eats 70 pills a day, an insanely regimented routine. He has his teenage son's blood plasma infused into his own body. His life is structured around body discipline and purity and measurement and ritual and transcendence. And it's almost become it's so structured. It's like he's a monk of his own monastic tradition. You know what I mean? At its core, wellness has many of the psychological functions of religion, and it's repackaged them in this kind of capitalist mindset. So you don't pray, but you journal and you meditate, and you follow Oprah and you use her journals to help you have a gratitude journal or whatever it is. And you don't confess your sins, but you cleanse your gut. You don't tithe, but you have subscriptions to specific supplements. And what's tricky is that this new religion of the self, it can feel very empowering, like you're taking control of your own body, until it doesn't, until you're burned out or broke or sick. And then you're told that it's not your fault or that it is your fault because you're not manifesting hard enough. And also the problem with this religion is that no matter what you do, even if you are Brian Johnson or you are Gwyneth Paltrow, you are still going to die. And sometimes they don't really ever face that or talk about that because you have this standard of purity and perfection that almost sounds like you're cheating death itself. And so I personally have mixed feelings on wellness because on the one hand, I do think that how you treat your body and mind does matter. I do. This is where you're going to be spending all of your time and experience in this meat suit. Even Nietzsche, for how pessimistic he could sometimes be, he really believed that if you're not going to live the good life if you eat in such a way that makes you passive or easy to control. And so he saw food not just as fuel, but as something that shaped the human spirit and morality and mood and creativity and even strength of will. And so he was very regimented with his food because his food then helped him to have the strength of will to become the Ubermensch, someone who really lives an authentic life. And so I do notice that some foods make me more neurotic. Chocolate makes me neurotic, which I've always said if there is a God, that's just mean. That's just mean-spirited. And so I do think care of the body matters, especially if you are on my channel and dealing with things like depression and nihilism. I do think giving your brain and body its best shot as far as just the basic biology it can do a lot. But I absolutely despise Gwyneth Paltrow Goopland. I have no patience for it. I really think she is a cult leader. The Goop Wellness Summits charge up to $2,000 per ticket. You do these rituals, you have psychic readings, you have IV drips, you have superfood ceremonies. And so some of it is pseudoscience and some of it is wellness and some of it is spiritual and some of it is new age, psychic medium kind of spiritual. And then the superfood ceremony and some of it's spiritual and it's all kind of lumped together. And California regulators sued Goop, in her company, in 2018, and it was a lawsuit over false health claims, which was upheld. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the public scandal over this only fueled Goop's cult-like status and reinforced group loyalty because now big companies, big pharma, big government is after us because we're onto something. And Goop features medical mediums that claim to cure cancer and via spiritual communication. And all of that for me is just an instant no. So I would say my final take on this one, some people really do spirituality through the body. I have lots of clients like that are really body oriented people. So I have no issue with embodiment as spirituality. There's especially many feminine forms of spirituality that are really about embodiment. How do I get deeper awareness into my own body? Love that journey for you. Not my particular journey, but love that journey for you. I've been doing, my son actually recently has been really getting into sauna and cold plunges. Like he really has been loving it. I do think he's one of those embodiment kind of people where he really comes alive in his own body. So I'm not against everything from that world. And I do meditations and I exercise. I'm turning 40 in 2 weeks. So I, try to lift weights and I go on a walk and I try to eat what's good for my brain and all of that. But its shadow side has to be tempered with rationality, because without that grounding in evidence and critical thinking, wellness goes from being this like beautiful, nourishing practice of really being at home in your body to something that's really dangerously exploitative. And that's the risk when spiritual systems go unregulated and unquestioned. When there's no accountability, no limits to what counts as like healing, then all it takes is a charismatic figure with a green juice and a self-help mantra to start kind of selling new forms of salvation. And the worst part is that when it inevitably fails you, when you still get sick or anxious or your body still changes with age, you're often blamed for not doing it right. Like you didn't cleanse enough, you didn't align, you weren't aligned, whatever that means. Your frequencies were not aligned and you need to align your vibrations or whatever. And so just like in high control religions, wellness can become like a closed system. Okay, I promise I'm going to go through the other 6 faster, but I just have a really hard time with Gwyneth Paltrow and spirituality as $100 like jade vagina eggs. Like it really irks me, especially as a woman, where like diet culture becomes a moral thing and how much that effed us all up as women. And I'm just not a fan of that. Okay, religion number 2 is like digital conspiracies, like whatever the rabbit hole is. And this can be on the political left or the right. And so this is where like your political grand narrative is your religion. So like incel culture or like, the vaccine, whatever side of that. And so in the post-pandemic spiritual landscape, we call this conspirituality. It's a fusion of conspiracy theory and new age spirituality. And this has surged, creating what feels like a new religion for those seeking answers outside mainstream institutions. So these communities build these shared narratives that, quote unquote, deep states or cosmic awakenings or vaccine suppression. And it's wrapped in like Instagram aesthetics and spiritual jargon like energy sovereignty or truth seeker. And participants find meaning and identity and ritual in uncovering hidden truths and rejecting conventional science or whatever the conventional narrative is. And it's often under the banner of personal empowerment. So this belief system taps into what religious scholar B. Franks calls quasi-religious mentality. It's a cognitive structure where believers treat conspiracies like they're sacred revealed truths. In the same way that a Christian would be like, you need to do this. You need to learn this. You need to have access to this revealed truth. People start talking that way about whatever their conspiracy theory hole is. And so followers engage in like this collective sense making, and they will increasingly, just like religions, will increasingly alienate themselves from mainstream reality by design. And so it creates this echo chamber constructed online that operates very much like a cult. It's a closed system. Doubt is screened out, and new members are indoctrinated gradually through algorithms. This is what we call the pipelines. You're just watching a video about sourdough, and you don't know that you've entered the pipeline of an actual functioning religion, essentially. And so in real world impact, these communities behave towards information and community very much like a cult-like religion, and their belief narratives can foster this radical sectarianism. We can even see violent events tied to like QAnon or vaccine refusal movements. And participants who reject mainstream science form these exclusive groups that are really sealed. And so not only is the information insulated, but you even start to see like mom groups formed on the basis of whatever you believe about vaccines, your attitudes towards gluten, whether you voted for Trump or not. And so your actual community becomes insular as well, not just online. And so this provides community. It's online community, but it's community, orientation and ritual and meaning, and sometimes even like eschatology, which is the notion of this impending great awakening. People need to wake up to the truth, kind of that, like that. And they start to sound like missionaries, honestly. So it provides community and orientation, ritual, meaning, and even a sense of like, we need to awaken people to the truth. And so you'll start to hear them talk like missionaries, really. Like, you need to wake up to this reality. You need to wake up to the truth. You're being a sheep, you're following big pharma, you believe the government, all these kinds of things. And so this world kind of operates outside accountability. It thrives on suspicion, and it can spiral into isolation and even radicalization on whatever side it is, depending on what the rabbit hole is. So this new religion, I'm just not a fan of across the board on the right or the left. I've always said that if I had to raise kids in a political religion or a theological religion, I would rather raise them in a theological religion, some kind of version of Christianity or something, because at least you'll get some stories from Jesus or Buddha or something. But political religions are like all the dogma of religion, but it has no soul. You're never wrong. Once you get into this kind of insulated rabbit hole, you're never going to come across information where you're going to be challenged. Where at least if you go into a church, you're going to have to sit next to somebody who votes differently from you, or you're going to hear some stories that will challenge you from time to time. And so I don't like these political religions because your side is the good guy, the other side is fundamentally stupid or evil or being controlled, and I just see no growth in that. And so this one is just like a no from me across the board. I'm not interested in being in the cult of the left. And yes, that does exist, even as we have to say that, even as someone who has historically leaned left. And I'm not alt-right either, but there are political values on the left and on the right that we need for certain things. And if you cannot see the values of the other side of the aisle at all, you don't see any political values on the other side, or you see the people on the other side of the political aisle as fundamentally different in their humanity, I think that that's problematic. But that's as much as I want to say on that, because I'm not a political commentator and I try to stay in my lane and really talk about it as it pertains to politics as a religion. I think it's just a good question to say, what are you building your life around? Because everyone is religious about something. It might be fitness or your political identity or your fandom or your polycool. But something is giving you some sense of what's real and what's good and what's true and what's worth sacrificing for. There's some way that you're orienting. And so the danger of these new religions isn't that they exist. It's that they're often just kind of operating without structure, without elders, without accountability, without the humility that comes from being part of a long tradition that has existed before you and will exist after you. So we know the problems of fundamentalism and patriarchal religion, but now we have kind of the problems of the other side. We have so much individualism that we lose community. We no longer have a place where you have to sit down with people who voted differently than you. Church used to do that. We no longer are accessing the wisdom of our elders. We just put them in a home. We don't have authority, which is great in many ways, but it also means that there's no checks and balances. And I've lost so many friends to their own belief systems of spiritual dimensions and past lives and crystals and mushrooms land, where there's no check to your ego and no rationality. All this to say, I do think that everyone is religious. Human nature, I think, is religious, meaning they long for the things that create religion. I think that's part of human nature. But I don't go as far as to say, like Jordan Peterson, where I say that means there's a God and whatever you worship is your God and no one is an atheist. I think he goes off the rails there. But I do think that we can say this is a place where secularism is struggling. We've failed to produce the community and ritual and story and moral education and place where elders can share their wisdom in the same way that religion has. And it's something that secularism is going to have to get better at as Gen Z comes of age and the meaning crisis expands. So my question is just, what, if any of these new religions speak to you? How do you cobble together your own religion? My own personal religion is unique to me. It's a horizontal moral system. It's mysticism from my Sufi teacher. It's the ancient texts that I wrestle with. It's the rebellion of Jesus that I studied in seminary. It's the love of a life of service and family that I learned from Mormonism, even though I'm no longer Mormon. It's a lot of Lord of the Rings, that there's things worth fighting for in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's my saint. I have my saints up here. Bill Murray, who's got, the best lesson on existentialism in the movie Groundhog Day, how to build a life, even if it's ultimately meaningless. I've got my friends that I've cobbled together, and the She Shed, which is my temple that I come to daily to connect with others and whatever I'm thinking about, and to learn and to think and to read. And so it's a good exercise to actually describe, if we were to accept for a moment that humans are religious by nature and in need of orienting, could you describe your orientation? What are the rituals, people, stories, and values that dictate your life? Let me know in the comments.